was a day that began like any other in 1968. The halls of Anneliese Michel's school buzzed with the usual chatter of students. Anneliese, a quiet and diligent girl of just 16, sat at her desk, focused on her work. But in an instant, her world would shatter. Without warning, her body convulsed violently. Her classmates watched in shock as her muscles stiffened and her limbs jerked uncontrollably. Her eyes rolled back and she fell to the floor, unconscious. Teachers rushed to her side, but no one knew what was happening. It seemed like a seizure, something medical, but there was a dark undercurrent that no one could explain. Her family, deeply religious, feared the worst, but put their faith in medical science. After being rushed to the hospital, doctors diagnosed her with temporal lobe epilepsy. This condition, they explained, could cause seizures, memory lapses, and in some cases, hallucinations. It wasn't uncommon for someone with epilepsy to experience strange visions or voices. The doctors were confident that with medication, Anneliese would be able to live a relatively normal life. But what if it wasn't epilepsy at all? What if something far more terrifying had begun to take hold of Anneliese on that very day? What if this was the first sign of something otherworldly, something dark? For the next few years, Anneliese's seizures persisted. Despite taking her medication, the episodes continued, and as time went on, they began to worsen. But it wasn't just the seizures that troubled her. Soon she began seeing things, horrific, twisted faces that would appear out of nowhere, leering at her, mocking her. The faces were grotesque, filled with malice, and no matter how much she prayed, they wouldn't go away. And then came the voices. These voices didn't speak kindly. They hissed terrible things in her ears, things no young girl should ever hear. They told her she was damned, that she was evil, and that she was going to burn in hell. They mocked her faith, telling her that no amount of praying would save her from her fate. Anneliese, who had once found solace in her religion, now found herself spiraling into a terrifying reality where nothing made sense. At first, her family and doctors believed the hallucinations and voices were simply symptoms of her epilepsy. But what if they were wrong? What if these weren't hallucinations at all? If this started happening to you or someone you love, would you think it was a medical problem, or would you believe something more sinister was at play? Let us know in the comments. As Anneliese's condition grew worse, so did her fear. The visions and voices that haunted her weren't going away. They were growing stronger, more powerful, and soon they would take over her entire life. By 1970, Anneliese Michel was living in constant fear. Her once normal life had been overtaken by terrifying visions and voices that she couldn't escape. She tried to carry on as usual, to attend school and be with her friends, but it was impossible. Every day was a battle against the dark forces that seemed to be growing stronger inside her. At first, she confided in her family, telling them about the horrific things she was seeing. But how could she explain the twisted faces that would appear out of nowhere, sneering at her, their eyes filled with hatred? How could she explain the voices that constantly whispered to her, telling her she was a sinner, that her soul was lost? Even in her dreams, there was no escape. The nightmares were relentless, filled with shadows and figures that she couldn't recognize. Her family, devout Catholics, believed that prayer was the answer. They encouraged her to seek comfort in the church, to find peace in her faith. But as Anneliese tried to pray, something even more disturbing began to happen. She couldn't bear to be near anything religious. The crucifixes that once brought her comfort now filled her with terror. The very sight of a cross made her skin crawl, and she would recoil as if it burned her. She stopped going to church, unable to stand the holy imagery that surrounded her. Even the mention of God or Jesus caused her unbearable anxiety. It was as if her very faith had turned against her. And then, one night, something happened that shook Anneliese to her core. She woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of cold breath on her neck. When she opened her eyes, she saw a dark figure standing at the foot of her bed. It was a shadow, faceless, but she could feel its malice. It whispered her name softly, almost lovingly, but with a hidden threat beneath its words. Anneliese screamed, her parents rushing to her side. But when they turned on the lights, the figure was gone. Was it a hallucination? A trick of the mind? Or had something truly evil entered Anneliese's life? As time passed, the experiences only grew worse. Anneliese's once strong faith was now shattered. She felt as though she was being tormented by something supernatural. Her parents began to fear the worst. Could their daughter be under attack from demonic forces? By 1973, Anneliese's condition had reached a breaking point. Her family, unable to watch their daughter suffer any longer, turned to the Catholic Church. They believed that whatever was happening to Anneliese couldn't be explained by medicine alone. They believed that their daughter was under the influence of demonic possession. They approached several priests, describing Anneliese's symptoms, the visions, the voices, the violent reactions to holy objects. They begged for help, pleading with the church to perform an exorcism. But the church didn't grant exorcisms easily. The Rituale Romanum, the official guidelines for exorcisms, was clear. Exorcism could only be performed if there were undeniable signs of possession. The possessed would need to demonstrate superhuman strength, speak in languages they had never learned, or show knowledge of hidden things that they couldn't possibly know. At that point, Anneliese's symptoms were horrifying, but they didn't yet meet the church's strict criteria for possession. Her violent seizures, her aversion to religious symbols, her hallucinations, the church believed these could still be symptoms of mental illness. The priests encouraged Anneliese's family to seek further medical treatment. Doctors prescribed new medications for her epilepsy, hoping to control the seizures and alleviate the hallucinations. But nothing seemed to work. Anneliese's condition only grew worse. She stopped attending school altogether, unable to concentrate or function in a normal environment. She withdrew from her friends and spent most of her days in her room, alone with the terrifying voices that wouldn't leave her. Her once vibrant personality had disappeared, replaced by a deep and unshakable fear. The Michel family was torn. They didn't know what to believe. Was their daughter suffering from a serious mental illness, or was she truly under the influence of something dark and demonic? No matter how much they prayed, no matter how many doctors they consulted, nothing seemed to help. And as the months dragged on, the darkness within Anneliese only grew stronger. If you were in Anneliese's family's position, would you continue to seek medical help, or would you turn to the church for an exorcism? Let us know what you would have done. The church, still unconvinced of true possession, refused to act, but it wouldn't be long before the signs became impossible to ignore. By 1975, Anneliese Michel's life had become a living nightmare. Her behavior had spiraled out of control in ways that her family could no longer explain. The terrifying visions and voices that had haunted her for years were now consuming her entire being. She wasn't just seeing things or hearing things, she was becoming someone else entirely. The once sweet, quiet girl her family had known was gone, replaced by someone or something violent, uncontrollable, and filled with rage. Anneliese would scream for hours at a time, her voice sounding nothing like her own. It was deeper, more guttural, almost inhuman. She spoke in languages that no one could understand, languages she had never studied. Sometimes she would growl like an animal, her eyes wild with a look of pure hatred. Other times she would collapse into fits of laughter, mocking her family, mocking the prayers they whispered to try and help her. But the most disturbing change came in Anneliese's relationship with food. She stopped eating altogether. She claimed that the demons inside her wouldn't allow her to consume anything. Her weight dropped rapidly, her once healthy body becoming gaunt and fragile. Her skin was pale, her cheeks hollow, her eyes sunken deep into her skull. Despite her weakened state, during her fits of rage, Anneliese seemed to possess unnatural strength. She would throw herself against walls, hitting her head so hard that her family feared she would hurt herself. She tore at her own skin, scratching and biting herself until her arms and legs were covered in wounds. At one point, she even tried to bite through the wooden bedposts in her room. Her family, horrified by what they were witnessing, could only watch helplessly. This wasn't the Anneliese they knew. This was something else. The most terrifying moments came when she destroyed religious objects in the house. The crucifixes that hung on the walls, the rosaries her family used to pray, she tore them apart with her bare hands, screaming obscenities in a voice that wasn't her own. It was as if the very sight of anything holy sent her into a violent frenzy. The family's fear was now unbearable. They could no longer deny what was happening. Anneliese Michel wasn't just sick, she was possessed. If you were witnessing this kind of behavior firsthand, would you believe it was a demonic possession? Or would you still think it could be a medical issue? Let us know what you think. The Michel family had exhausted all medical options. Despite countless doctor visits, treatments, and medications, nothing had worked. In fact, everything seemed to be getting worse. It was clear to them now that whatever was happening to Anneliese couldn't be explained by medicine alone. It was something far more sinister, something that only the church could fight. They returned to the Catholic Church, pleading once again for an exorcism. This time, the church could no longer ignore the signs. Father Ernst Alt, the local priest who had been monitoring Anneliese's case, was now convinced that she was possessed. He had witnessed the violent fits, the destruction of religious objects, and her unnatural strength during her seizures. He believed without a doubt that demonic forces were at play. Father Alt reported his findings to Bishop Joseph Stengel, and after years of refusal, the church finally gave its approval for an exorcism. The task was assigned to Father Alt and another experienced priest, Father Arnold Renz. Together, they would conduct the exorcism following the ancient rites outlined in the Ritual Romanum. The Michel family breathed a sigh of relief, believing that this exorcism would save their daughter's soul. But they had no idea of the horror that was about to unfold. Exorcism is no simple process. It is a battle between the forces of good and evil, a battle for the soul of the possessed. The priests would need to confront the demons that had taken hold of Anneliese, and they knew it would be dangerous. But they didn't expect it to be this dangerous. The exorcism began in September 1975, and what followed was a harrowing ordeal that would last for 10 months. During the first exorcism session, the priests asked Anneliese who was inside her. They needed to know the names of the demons they were facing. What Anneliese revealed was beyond anything they had imagined. She wasn't possessed by just one demon. She was possessed by 6. The demons claimed to be Lucifer, Cain, Judas Iscariot, Nero, Fleischmann, a disgraced priest from the 16th century, and even Adolf Hitler. Each demon spoke through Anneliese in a different voice, their personalities distinct, their hatred palpable. The voices that came from Anneliese were unrecognizable, deep, and filled with malice. Lucifer, the Prince of Darkness himself, seemed to dominate the sessions, mocking the priests, laughing at their prayers, and claiming that Anneliese's soul belonged to him. The priest sprinkled holy water on her, read from the Bible, and commanded the demons to leave in the name of God. But the demons only laughed. They mocked the priests, cursing them and telling them that their efforts were futile. The exorcisms continued, day after day, week after week. Anneliese's body was contorted into unnatural positions during the sessions. Her arms and legs would twist as though pulled by invisible forces. Her voice would shift between the 6 different demons, sometimes speaking in multiple voices at once. The things she said during these sessions were so vile, so filled with blasphemy and hatred that even the priests were shaken. Anneliese's family watched in horror as the exorcisms progressed. They had hoped that the rituals would bring peace to their daughter, but instead, it seemed as though the demons were fighting harder, clinging to her with every ounce of their strength. Anneliese's body was deteriorating rapidly. She had refused food for weeks, believing that the demons wouldn't allow her to eat. Her weight dropped dangerously low, and her once healthy body was now nothing more than skin and bones. Her face was gaunt, her eyes hollow. She was wasting away before their eyes. If you heard someone speak in multiple voices, each with a different personality, would you believe it was a demon? Or could it be explained another way? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Despite the exorcisms, despite the prayers, despite the holy water and the commands for the demons to leave, they remained. The demons inside Anneliese were relentless. They had no intention of letting her go. As the exorcisms dragged on, Anneliese's physical condition continued to deteriorate. She was no longer able to walk, her body too weak to move on its own. Her arms and legs were covered in bruises, her body riddled with sores from where she had torn at her skin during her fits. She was a shadow of the girl she had once been. But despite her physical frailty, Anneliese's spirit was strong. She believed that her suffering had a purpose. She told the priests and her family that she was meant to endure this torment, that she was suffering not just for herself, but for the sins of others. In one of her final exorcism sessions, Anneliese said something chilling. She told the priests that she believed her death was the only way to be free. She believed that her suffering would atone for the sins of the world, that her death would bring salvation to those who were lost. She told the priests, "I want to die to atone for others." The priests continued the exorcisms, praying for her soul, commanding the demons to leave, but the demons wouldn't go. Anneliese refused to eat. She believed that the demons were preventing her from consuming food, that they had taken complete control of her body. Her weight dropped to a mere 68 pounds, her body nothing more than a shell of its former self. Despite her suffering, she continued to endure the exorcisms, believing that this was her fate, that she was meant to die to save others. The exorcisms continued until July 1st, 1976. But on that day, Anneliese Michel died. She had starved to death, her body unable to survive the relentless torment it had endured for months. The official cause of death was listed as malnutrition and dehydration. But for her family, the cause of death was something far darker. She had been killed by the demons inside her. The prosecution pointed out that Anneliese had stopped taking her anti-epileptic medication a year before her death, and that the symptoms she exhibited, such as hearing voices, violent outbursts, and self-harm, could have been symptoms of psychosis or a severe mental disorder. According to them, her mental health had been grossly neglected. The defense, however, claimed that Anneliese Michel had been possessed. They brought forth the recordings from the exorcisms, which contained terrifying audio of Anneliese speaking in multiple voices, sometimes in languages she had never learned, cursing the priests and mocking God. They argued that the exorcisms were her only hope and that they were not to blame for her death. The trial divided the public. Some believed that Anneliese had indeed been possessed by demonic forces and that the priests and her family had done everything they could to save her. Others believed she had been a victim of religious fanaticism. Her mental illness misunderstood and untreated until it was too late. The trial lasted for months, and it was watched closely, not just in Germany, but around the world. The question wasn't just whether Anneliese Michel had been possessed. It was about the conflict between faith and science, and whether the church had overstepped its boundaries in trying to save her soul instead of her body. In the end, the court found Father Alt, Father Renz, and Anneliese's parents guilty of negligent homicide. However, they were given suspended sentences, meaning they did not serve time in prison. The decision was controversial. Some felt justice had been served, while others believed the church and Anneliese's family had been punished for trying to save her from something that medicine could not explain. Do you agree with the court's decision? Should the priests and her parents have been found guilty? Or were they trying to save her in the only way they knew how? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Even after the court's verdict, the debate over Anneliese Michel's case raged on. Was she truly possessed, or was she suffering from severe mental illness that was tragically misunderstood? To this day, experts on both sides of the argument continue to debate what really happened to Anneliese. Neurologists argue that Anneliese's symptoms could all be explained by epilepsy and psychosis, while theologians and believers in the supernatural insist that there were signs of demonic possession that could not be easily dismissed. The case of Anneliese Michel became a symbol of the tension between faith and medicine, between science and the supernatural. After the trial, interest in the supernatural surged. People were fascinated by the idea that a young woman in modern times could have been possessed by demons. Books were written about her case, and eventually, her story became the inspiration for the hit horror movie, The Exorcism of Emily Rose. But while the movie captured the horror of Anneliese's experiences, the real story is far more complex and far more tragic. Despite the trial's outcome, Anneliese's parents continued to believe that their daughter had been possessed. They believed that the exorcisms had been necessary, that without them, Anneliese's soul would have been lost forever. To them, their daughter had died a martyr, suffering to save her soul and perhaps the souls of others. In their eyes, Anneliese's death was not in vain. It had spiritual significance. Do you think Anneliese's death had spiritual significance? Or do you think it was a tragic case of mental illness being neglected? Share your thoughts below. Anneliese Michel's story has left a lasting legacy. To this day, her case remains one of the most well-documented and controversial cases of demonic possession in modern history. Her story continues to raise questions about the line between mental illness and possession, and whether the two can ever truly be distinguished. For those who believe in demonic possession, Anneliese Michel's story is a warning, a reminder that evil forces do exist and that they can take hold of the most vulnerable. It's a story of faith, of battling the forces of darkness, and of the ultimate sacrifice. But for those who believe in science, her story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of neglecting mental health and allowing religious beliefs to take precedence over medical treatment. It's a reminder of how important it is to understand the signs of psychosis and the tragic consequences that can occur when those signs are ignored. No matter what you believe, one thing is certain. Anneliese Michel's story is one that will continue to haunt us. Her life and her death leave us with questions that may never be fully answered. Was she truly possessed by demons? Or was she a young woman suffering from mental illness, trapped in a world where faith and science clashed? Was the exorcism her salvation, or was it the thing that ultimately led to her death? These are the questions that continue to linger in the minds of those who study her case, and they are questions that may never be answered. If you survived this nightmare, there's more waiting for you. Subscribe now and join us. Hit the bell so you're the first to witness our next fright.